Hello, hello and welcome in the name of HAU Hebel am Ufer here on the stage of HAU1 and to the book presentation of Paul B. Preciado's latest book translated into German, published by Suhrkamp Verlag with the title An Apartment on Uranus, Chronicles of the Crossing, auf Deutsch, Ein Apartment auf dem Uranus, Chroniken eines Übergangs, beautifully and carefully translated by, from French, from Stéphane Lorenza. And here we have the book with the cover. The cover is a self-portrait of Lorenza Böttner, an artist with which Paul worked a lot, or about, one should say. Yes. Yeah. Post-mortem. So you see here we are of course under corona conditions in this book presentation. It's redundant to say this meanwhile, but we have evolved a bit. This means we can do a bit more things on stage. So I have with me today, as a body in virtuality, Paul Beatrice Preciado. Hello, Paul.
Hello. Hi Margarita. Nice to be here with you.
Yes. And I have actually also bodies, real bodies, materializing on stage. I have the pleasure to sit in distance of 1.5 meters, which is pretty near, with dear friends, also dear common friends, Paul, with Black Cracker and Susanne Sachse, who agreed to read some fragments of the book for us, for this book presentation tonight. And I briefly will introduce them. Black Cracker, the infamous rapper, poet, producer, composer, someone that I think was important to open horizons aesthetically and politically in Berlin when he moved from New York here. And of course, Susanne Sachse, the iconic actress, artist, filmmaker, writer, performer, iconic for for feminist and queer culture, for feminist and queer theater and film. So, the structure of I am Margarita Tsomou. I am the Theory and Discourse curator here at the HAU, and I will be moderating and hosting through the evening. And the structure of the evening is that Susanne and Black Cracker will do a reading, then I will be in conversation with Paul, and then you, dear audience, can jump into our conversation, of course, virtually. You can participate through the chat that we posted under the live stream that you just see in YouTube or in several Facebook posts and also on our website. And you can send questions and comments anonymously, so feel free to participate. So, and before the reading, I thought that in order to introduce into the format of the book, what kind of book this is, we could have a word, Paul, you and me, to say, yes, to prepare for the reading.
Yes, sure.
So, This book is not a book written from the beginning to the end, developing one argument. This book has a special format. It is your journalistic interventions, your columns that you wrote for the French newspaper Libération, put together in chronological order from 2013 to 2018. So it's a book that is written as it goes. We follow you, we follow your travels in space and time, and we experience different kinds of movements of crossings, as you call them. Crossings on several levels. We have crossings with you in your travels from one corner of the world to another. We have crossings on the level of changes of political landscapes. This book is in a way also chronicles of historical events. It starts also with the rise of the extreme right in France. It goes over to European Greek financial crisis. I think central for it is the border crisis in 2015, the Catalan struggle, and if you were still writing it, you will now write about George Floyd and the riots in Minneapolis, I think. One has to say you continue to write the columns, of course, in Libération. but the book is out. And yes, if you read this book from the beginning to the end, it has, of course, a fragmentary character. It has, of course, an unpredictable character. We wake up with you in different cities, in different beds. We wake up with you with different thoughts, other voices, even sometimes in different bodies.
Yeah.
But I think, to put it in a nutshell, it is a personal, documentary, and political philosophical essay. For me, it could even be read as a fiction novel. It could be a figure that is invented by someone. And it's a book that, although it's so fragmented, it interweaves thought threads into a kind of what Virginie Despentes, who wrote the foreword of the book, calls a narrative braid. A braid, like something we do with long hair, so ideas come up and are depicted later on through the book. And of course, the common underline of all this is the crossing. There's the rhythm, or the hookup, the method, I would say, is the crossing, and you describe it in several related terms. You say mutation, transition, transit, identity, you say metamorphose, you say fluidity, liminality, you say change. And one could say, okay, this is not new to us from Preciado. This is a method of yours to think in perpetual becomings. But what I thought is that in this fragmentary way, you know, in this, that the format of the journalistic columns in a way materialized very well this movement of crossing, of transitioning. You also use Glissant's words of trembling. So this method that you have in this book, because it's so fragmented, and because it is, yes, not linear and jumpy, in a way it materializes in a very nice way. So this was my way to tell you what I think happened with this experiment of putting all these columns together in one book. And of course, my question is, what do you think happened in this experiment of putting these columns together in one book?
Well, thank you so much. Anyway, first I'd like to say hello to everyone that is joining us, and of course, like to all of you. I really feel like at the same time quite far away from you, and still like together with you and Black Cracker and Susanne and the whole team that is behind making possible that we're online. So yeah, I'm super touched, and it's still weird to be in my small apartment here in Paris and still being connected with you and being online. So, you know, and I have to say that Margarita is just, you're so amazing. Like the way you read the book, I'm basically like, you know, I'm thinking like, oh, I really want to read this book, you know, which is really not, because I think I didn't do it. You actually do the actual reading of the book much better of what I could have done, the writing of it. So,
it's
you
normal.
know.
Happens all the time, I think.
So what can I say? Well, maybe what could help is that basically what happened in the after the economic crisis of 2008. What happened in a sense is that I'm speaking now of Europe, but it could also be the same in the US or in South America in a certain respect, is that the extreme right and the neo-nationalist and I would say like techno-patriarchal voices started to organize themselves, and they started to use techniques that I'm going to say now us, like the radical left and the feminist and the sexual minority movements and so on, we have been using to basically demonstrate and take the streets for years. But suddenly, these extreme right, neo-nationalist, conservative forces came out to the streets and started to create or kind of promote a new language of hatred that actually, in a sense, gave power and legitimized an institutional language of hatred, an institutional language of racism and sexual violence that was already the language of the nation state. But suddenly they took it back and they put it on the streets. And this was a moment in which basically I thought that the work that I have been doing until then, which was mostly like basically, of course, like I've been trained as a philosopher. I've been teaching both philosophy and political theory, feminism, and so on, and also doing exhibitions or working in museums and so on. In a sense, I had the impression at that moment in 2013 that that work was crucial, still too confidential. That basically I found myself like living within the trans queer community and mostly speaking the same language with my friends and the struggles that I was living through. And suddenly I thought, well, someone has to go out and speak up to what is happening, because this is not possible. And most journals, main journals in France, I'm speaking in France because basically it's the place where I've been living for a really long time now, even though I've been like also moving a lot. But places like France, if you take like the main journals, let's say Libération, Le Monde, and so on, and I think it could be the same a little bit in Germany, you could tell me, they didn't have, in 2013, there was not a single like radical feminist voice is speaking in these places, like saying something to what was happening, basically, right? So you just had like a kind of a consensus of the right, like that suddenly became like a public discourse, right? So, and at that moment was the moment when Libération asked me if I wanted to say something in particular to the extreme right manifesting on the streets against the rights of people to get married, like homosexual or transsexual or like people to get married, and especially demonstrating on the streets on the name of children, like basically like protecting children from what they thought it was basically like a collapse of the moral order. And then that kind of touched I couldn't, because I this is probably something that people have to understand from my position, which might make me a little bit different from other feminists of my generation and other trans people from my generation, is basically that I was born in Spain, in a still fascist country. When I was born in 1970, and Spain was still a fascist country, and I was born in the very north of Spain, and the school, the streets, everything, my house was fascist and fascism all around. So that culture of fascism, I know it. I know what it is. And I felt it coming. I thought that is coming to take over again the streets, the institutions, the school, museums, everything. So, and then when they started to speak about like the protection of children, I thought, no, this is enough, you know. That's the moment for me to say no. I felt that I had been myself an unprotected child, that basically I was abused, not just individually. I was not abused as an individual. I was abused by a patriarchal, extremely racist, extremely sexist culture that I was growing up into. And that no one at that time could defend my rights, the rights of being just like a child that is like, you know, wishing to develop himself, herself, whatever, themselves differently, right? So then I thought, no, enough. I'm jumping into this situation, and I'm gonna speak for these children, because what I saw in France was unbelievable, was basically all these families like taking their children out, and basically with their children, like saying like, we oppose the gender theory, we oppose rights of homosexual with their children. And then I thought, well, many of these children that are there are probably, you know, like non-binary, gay, lesbians, trans people, whatever. And then I thought that I had to say something. And this is the way it started, basically. Okay. That's the first column that I wrote was that, and that kind of created a big discussion. And then since then on, I had to say something every time, because now I think that this is like something that everyone has noticed, right? That we live, I mean, I always say, people may not know it, but we live through a revolutionary time. We're living through a revolution. And even though it's a revolution that is taking a form that is not the form that we usually imagine for a revolution. But yes, we are living through a revolution.
Okay.
And those, the clash, the kind of fight that we see every day, almost every day, like every day now is something happening. There is no, and it's not because before people were not killed, like for instance, black people were not killed, they were killed, but now they're on the streets saying enough, enough, enough. This is the revolution happening.
Okay.
And also, well, I will stop here.
Yes, for now maybe. I think it's a good transition.
Yes.
To our reading, because you say there's a revolution that is happening, perpetually, durational revolution, one could say.
Yes.
And we will hear this now in the first column. Interesting enough, it's so actually your first column, which is written in 2013, it's called We Say Revolution, and is actually, you would say, still very contemporary, right?
Well,
yes.
I mean, yes, I might, if I had to write it today, I could add many other things.
Yes,
and
yes.
As a matter of fact, like many other people had added things also to these texts, that it became, different people kind of, sing it, and they add new things. And I think it's beautiful that basically it's like a long list of things that are still to be done.
Okay, very nice. So let's go and hear them. So we will start the reading. And we will start with Susanne.
Wir sagen Revolution. Es scheint, als wollten die Gurus des alten kolonialen Europa uns Aktivistinnen und Aktivisten der Occupy, Indignados, Krüppel, Trans, Schwuchtel, Lesben, Intersex- und Postporn-Bewegungen in diesen Jahren mit aller Macht einreden, wir könnten keine Revolution machen, weil uns dazu die Ideologie fehlt. Sie sagen Ideologie, wie meine Mutter Ehemann sagte. Nun, wir brauchen keine Ideologie und wir brauchen keinen Ehemann. Wir brauchen keinen Ehemann, wir neuen Feministinnen und Feministen, weil wir keine Frauen sind. Und weil wir kein Volk sind, brauchen wir keine Ideologie, keinen Kommunismus, keinen Liberalismus, so wenig wie die alte christlich-muslimisch-jüdische Leier. Wir sprechen eine andere Sprache. Sie sagen Repräsentation, wir sagen Experiment. Sie sagen Identität, wir sagen Vielfalt. Sie sagen die Banlieues in den Griff bekommen, wir sagen die Stadt durchmischen. Sie sagen Schulden, wir sagen sexuelle Kooperation und somatische Interdependenz. Sie sagen Humankapital. Wir sagen artenübergreifende Allianz. Sie sagen, bei uns kommt Pferdefleisch auf den Tisch. Wir sagen, lasst uns aufs Pferd steigen und zusammen den globalen Schlachthof zu entkommen. Sie sagen Macht, wir sagen Kraft. Sie sagen Integration, wir sagen Open Source. Sie sagen Mann, Frau, Schwarz, Weiß, Mensch, Tier, homosexuell, heterosexuell, Israel, Palästina. Wir sagen, du weißt aber schon, dass deine Wahrheitsproduktionsmaschine nicht mehr funktioniert. Aber dem Wohlfahrtsstaat, der auch die Psychiatrie, die Behindertenanstalt, das Gefängnis, die patriarchal-kolonialistisch-heterozentrische Schule war, weinen wir keine Tränen nach. Es ist Zeit, Foucault auf krüppelqueere Diät zu setzen und den Tod der Klinik zu schreiben. Es ist Zeit, Marx zum ökosexuellen Workshop einzuladen. Und wir werden uns hüten, den Disziplinarstaat gegen den neoliberalen Markt auszuspielen, mit dem er sich längst verbündet hat. Im neuen Europa ist der Markt die eine und einzige Staatsräson und der Staat bloß noch die Handlungslanger, dessen Funktion darin besteht, Sicherheitspanik zu verbreiten, um die Fiktion der nationalen Identität aufrechtzuerhalten. Wir möchten uns weder als kognitive Arbeiter noch als pharmapornografische Konsumenten begreifen. Wir sind nicht Facebook, so wenig wie Google, Nestle oder Pfizer-Wyeth. Wir wollen weder französisch produzieren noch europäisch. Wir wollen gar nicht produzieren. Wir sind das lebendige, dezentralisierte Netzwerk. Wir verweigern uns einer Staatsbürgerschaft, die sich durch unsere Produktions- oder Reproduktionskraft definiert. Wir wollen eine totale Staatsbürgerschaft, die sich durch das Teilen von Techniken, von Flüssigkeiten, von Samen, von Wasser, von Wissen definiert. Sie sagen, der neue Krieg wird ein Drohnenkrieg sein. Wir wollen mit den Drohnen Liebe machen. Unser Aufstand ist der Frieden, der totale Affekt. Sie sagen Krise, wir sagen Revolution. Paris, 20. März 2013.
Thank you. And just to add, of course, we will have two columns in German, because we thought it is important to read from the German translation, since it is the new version of the book, and Black Cracker will read in English. Thank you.
Feminism is not a humanism. During one of his infinite conversations, Hans Ulrich Ulrichs asked me to pose an urgent question to be answered by artists and political movements. I say, how can we live with animals? How can we live with the dead? Someone else asks, what about humanism and feminism? Ladies, gentlemen, and others. Once and for all, feminism is not a humanism. Feminism is an animalism. In other words, animalism is an expanded feminism and not anthropocentric. The first machines in the Industrial Revolution were not steam engines, printing presses, or guillotines, but slave labor on the plantation, sexual and reproductive female workers, and animals. The first machines in the Industrial Revolution were living machines. So humanism invented another body that it called human, a sovereign, white, heterosexual, healthy, seminal body, a stratified body full of organs, full of capital, whose actions are timed and whose desires are the effects of a necro-political technology of pleasure. Liberté, égalité, fraternity. Animalism reveals the colonial, patriarchal roots of those universal principles of European humanism. Renaissance enlightenment and the miracle of the Industrial Revolution depend then on the reduction of slave and woman to the status of animal, and on the reduction of all three, slaves, women, and animals, to that of reproductive machines. If animals were at some point conceived of and treated as machines, then machines, little by little, became techno-animals existing among techno-living animals. Machine and animal, migrants, pharmaco-pornographic bodies, children of Dolly, the sheep, electro-digital brains, AI, constitute new political subjects of the animalism yet to come. Machine and animal are our quantum homonyms. Animalism is not naturalism. It is an entire ritual system, a counter-technological producing awareness, conversion to a form of life without any sovereignty whatsoever, without any hierarchy whatsoever. Animalism institutes its own law, its own economy. Animalism is not a contractual moralism. It refutes the aesthetics of capitalism and capitalism's domination and desire through consumption of goods, ideas, information, bodies. Animalism rests neither on exchange nor on individual interest. The economy of animalism is a total system of non-agonistic subsidy, a corporation like photosynthesis, a molecular orgasm. Animalism is the wind blowing, the way the spirit of the forest of Adam still holds sway over thieves. Humans, those masked incarnation of the forest, should unmask themselves of the human and mask themselves again in the knowledge of the bees. The time of animalism is the time of the impossible and the unimaginable. This is our time, the only time that is left to us. Paris, 27th September 2014.
Eine andere Stimme. Ich gewöhne mich an meine neue Stimme. Das Testosteron, das ich mir verabreiche, lässt die Stimmbänder wachsen und dicker werden und erzeugt so ein dunkles Timbre. Diese Stimme klingt, als käme sie aus einer Gasmaske in meinem Inneren. Ich spüre eine Schwingung, die sich in meiner Kehle fortpflanzt, wie eine Tonaufzeichnung, die aus meinem Mund schallt, der sich in ein seltsames Megafon verwandelt hat. Ich erkenne mich nicht wieder. Aber was heißt in diesem Satz ich? Können Subalterne sprechen? Diese Frage, mit der Gayatri Spivak auf die komplexen Bedingungen des sich Äußerns kolonisierter Völker hinweisen wollte, gewinnt hier eine andere Bedeutung. Was, wenn das Subalterne auch eine Möglichkeit ist, die unserer eigenen Subjektwertung immer schon innewohnt? Wie können wir den transsexuellen Subaltern in uns zum Sprechen bringen? Mit welcher Stimme? Und wenn der Verlust der eigenen Stimme, des ontotheologischen Zeugen der Souveränität des Subjekts, die Grundvoraussetzung dafür ist, den Subalternen sprechen zu lassen. Auch die anderen erkennen diese vom Testosteron veränderte Stimme offenbar nicht wieder. Das Telefon ist nicht länger ein verlässlicher Bote, sondern zum Verräter geworden. Ich rufe meine Mutter an und sie antwortet: Wer ist da, wer spricht da bitte? Dass sie mich nicht erkennt, bringt eine Distanz zum Vorschein, die immer schon da war. Ich habe mit ihnen gesprochen und sie haben mich nicht erkannt und anerkannt. Dass es der Nachfrage bedarf, stellt die Abstammung auf die Probe. Bin ich wirklich ihr Kind? Bin ich je wirklich ihr Kind gewesen? Eine Stimme, die bislang nicht die meine war, sucht Zuflucht in meinem Körper und ich werde sie ihr gewähren. Ich reise die ganze Zeit. Ich bin eine Woche in Istanbul, die nächste in Kiew, in Barcelona, Athen, Berlin, Kassel, Helsinki, Frankfurt, Stuttgart. In der Reise spricht sich der Prozess der Verwandlung aus, als wollte die äußere Drift vom inneren Nomadentum erzählen. Ich wache selten zweimal nacheinander im selben Bett auf oder im selben Körper. Diese scheinbar männliche Stimme verändert die Kodifizierung meines Körpers und befreit ihn von der anatomischen Beweislast. Die epistemische Gewalt des biologischen wie des sozialen Geschlechts reduziert die radikale Heterogenität dieser neuen Stimme auf die Männlichkeit. Die Stimme ist die Herrin der Wahrheit. Dann kommt mir die möglicherweise gemeinsame Wurzel testis der lateinischen Wörter für temion, ein Testikül, Zeuge und Hoden in den Sinn. Im römischen Recht kam vor dem Gesetz das Wort nur ergreifen, wer Hoden hat. Ganz wie es mit der Pille zu einer technischen Trennung zwischen Heterosexualität und Fortpflanzung kam, sorgt das Cyclopentylpropionat, das ich mir intramuskulär verabreiche, für eine Trennung der Hormonproduktion von den Hoden. Anders gesagt, meine Hoden, wenn man darunter das Testosteron produzierende Organ versteht, sind anorganisch. Es sind externe, kollektive Hoden und sie sind teils von der Pharmaindustrie abhängig und teils von den juristischen und medizinischen Institutionen, die mir das Molekül zur Verfügung stellen. Meine Hoden sind eine kleine Flasche mit 250 Milligramm Testosteron, die ich in meinem Rucksack bei mir trage. Die Frage ist nicht, ob meine Hoden sich außerhalb meines Körpers befinden, sondern ob mein Körper außerhalb meiner Haut ist, an einem Ort, der nicht einfach als zu mir gehörend begriffen werden kann. Der Körper ist nicht Eigentum, sondern Verhältnis. Die sexuelle, geschlechtliche, nationale oder rassifizierte Identität ist nicht Wesenssubstanz, sondern Relation. Diese Hoden sind ein politisches, kollektiv erfundenes Organ, mit dem wir absichtsvoll die vielfältigsten Formen sozialer Männlichkeit erzeugen können, Verkörperungsweise, die wir aufgrund kultureller Konvention als männlich erkennen. Indem es sich mit meinem Blut vermischt, stimuliert das synthetische Testosteron die vordere Hypophyse sowie den Hypothalamus und die Eierstöcke stellen keine Eier mehr her. Es kommt indes zu keiner Spermaproduktion, da mein Körper weder über Sertoli-Zellen noch über Samenleiter verfügt. Ich gehe davon aus, dass der Tag nicht mehr fern ist, da ein 3D-Drucker sie auf einer Grundlage meiner eigenen DNA wiederherstellen können. Für den Augenblick bleibt in den Grenzen unserer kapitalistischen, petrolinguistischen Epistemie die Herstellung meiner Transidentität eher eine Low-Tech-Bastelarbeit. Das erste Wort, das ich ausspreche, ist mir jeden Morgen ein Rätsel. Die Stimme, die aus meinem Körper spricht, erinnert sich nicht an sich selbst. Und das seinerseits mutierende Gesicht bietet der Stimme keinen Halt, keinen festen Anhaltspunkt, an dem sie sich ihrer Identität vergewissern könnte. Im Gegenteil, sie dekliniert die Subjektivität im Plural. Sie sagt nicht ich, sie sagt, wir sind die Reise. Vielleicht ist es das, was von abendländischen Ich und jenem absurden Anspruch auf individuelle Anatomie bleibt, der Ort zu sein, an dem die Sinne sich erhebt und sich auflöst. Der Ort, hätte Derrida gesagt, von dem aus der phallozentristische sich dekonstruieren lässt. Die Stimme, also der Wahrheit des Subjekts beraubt und in dem Wissen, dass die Hoden stets ein prothetischer, sozialer Apparat sind, komme ich mir vor wie eine derridaische Fallstudie und lache über mich selbst und spüre lachend, wie mir in meiner Kehle die Stimme entgleist. Athen, 24. Oktober 2015.
Pack up your things. Don't produce anything. Change your sex. Become your professor's teacher. Be a disciple of your students. Be your leader's lover. Be your dog's pet. Anything that walks on two legs is an enemy. Take care of your nurse. Go into a prison and replay the main scene of Animal Farm. Become your secretary's assistant. Go clean the cleaner's house. Prepare a cocktail for the bartender. Close the clinic, cry, and laugh. Renounce the religion that was given to you. Dance on the grave in your secret cemetery. Change your name. Change your ancestors. Don't try to please. Don't buy anything you've seen advertised on a screen or any other visual prompt. Bury the statue of Apollo. Don't try to please. Pack up your things without knowing where you're moving. Abandon your children. Stop working. Go to a refugee camp and play the main scene in Animal Farm. Paint, weave, don't build a house, don't accumulate, don't eat other animals, don't encourage human development, don't multiply, don't increase profits, don't improve yourself, don't download YouTube videos if you haven't already done so, don't reproduce, don't modernize yourself, don't use communication in a strategic way, don't plan the future. Try to do the fewest things possible in the maximum amount of time. Don't try to improve your productivity. Go into a retirement home and replay the main scene in Animal Farm. Don't give any explanation. Admire the learning that others don't regard as knowledge. Don't digitalize anything. Don't leave a trace. Send a note to your competitors. Say, I'm done. Happy New Year. Don't increase the logistical infrastructure. Choose life rather than scientific prolongation of hope for life. All animals are equal. Barcelona, 24th December, 2016.
Thank you, Black Cracker and Susanne. I have to clap. I cannot not clap. Dear audience, it's a big pity that you're not here to reward this with a nice, thick, rich clapping. Now it was me clapping, and also together we did a rich clapping together with the only person in the audience, which is Peaches tonight, and we did our best in the clapping. Yes, and Paul. So this is what we could do.
No, but this is amazing. I
Yes.
have to say thank you so much to Black Kaka and Susanne, because this is like it's a dream to hear the book being read this way, and also for me voices, like bodily living voices are so crucial, that suddenly like feeling what I wrote like being read by both of you was like super touching and beautiful. Thank you so much, really, like amazing.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah, yes.
Peaches is clapping, dear audience, on your screens. You might hear her. Yes, I think it's good. For me also, it was a new experience after reading them in 3 different languages to hear them also through so different voices. And I think it is worth it to mention that initially we wanted to do this book presentation in a performative format, where we would have had 3 performances, 3 different voices, and a robot on stage.
Absolutely.
So 4 voices, and this is how you actually wished this book to be presented, right? You didn't want to do a normal presentation. We thought, yes, let's do a presentation, and you already wanted to hear it in many voices. And also in the book, you say, this book is written in at least 2 voices. And also we know, you say in the introduction, that throughout the book, you have been signing with different names. It started as a book signed as Beatrice Preciado, and it ended as a book signed as Paul B. Preciado, and in the middle we had also other names. So it is completely a book of multiplicated voices, yes, of multiple voices. So since we talk about voice, I would be interested a bit in the question of the addressment, the language, right? I think we heard all the Preciadian possible languages here, the call to arms with, we say revolution and pack up your things, that I understand now that you said you wanted to speak up with this column, right? So there is a lot of this imperative, to the reader, speak up, do something, do the revolution, in a way.
I guess, or maybe instead of, for me, it was not so much like do the revolution, but just like first be aware a revolution is going on. And the worst that could happen to you is basically not even realize that this is happening, which it seems to me that is very much the case within the neoliberal condition. Maybe the corona has changed this a little bit because of the, let's say, I would say not just the medical crisis or the economic crisis, but also the aesthetic crisis that now suddenly certain like this confrontation with death has brought all of us to life differently, right? But before, I think that one of the ways in which the neoliberal condition works is basically capturing the totality of the desire of the subject, up to the point that basically there is almost like a condition of either total pessimism or basically depression, right? So for me, it was not so much like basically like you have to do the revolution, because I don't really know. I don't think, and also I don't feel it also either as a call to arms, because it's such a, I think that's the nuance for me, that all the ideas that we have from the revolution have to do with the tradition of necropolitics, have to do with the tradition of war. And of course that sometimes when violence is being done to us, we have to oppose that violence, and then this gesture will be read as violent, right? So I'm not saying here that I oppose all kinds of violence, because that would be like really problematic. But what I'm saying is that we need to invent collectively ways of struggling, ways of acting that will not be under the tradition of the war, right? So, and that's why, for instance, these let's say like the fallen heroes of the war are the more interesting bodies to me, those bodies that normally we do not call to be together with us for this war, right? Either because they are like sick, or because they are children, or because they are the elderly, or because they are animals. I mean, all these bodies that seem not to qualify so well for this soldier figure or subjects of the war, which is basically, I would say, at the center of the anthropological model, both on the right and on the left. I do have many struggles as well with the left within the book, right? Because basically, for me, both let's say the liberal tradition, but also the communist tradition, in a sense, they both share a patriarchal colonial epistemological base, right? So I think that now what I was trying to do when I kind of wrote these different texts and chronicles and so on was, instead of calling to arms, I was trying to this was quite is still a strategic, and I still don't know how to do it, but I try to do it every time that I have the occasion of speaking publicly, because I think it's crucial. The way we will be able or not to construct an alliance of different movements that have until now been thought in terms of identity politics, right? So I think that in this book, or that now is a book, but in this like series of texts, I am calling more for this identification and looking for strategic alliances to fight the patriarchal colonial regime, that basically I will be just like calling for an identity politics movement. I think we are now in a very different moment than the identity politics moment. Yeah.
I mean, yes, we can, you say it a lot in the book already. It's not only now, but already in the book you deconstruct completely the epistemologies that assign identities. You said so many things that I don't know where to. And the alliance, I also think, is important that we touch upon. I wanted to ask, you know, you never talk about the left in the book. Very, very rarely. You know, although it's a book coming from this desire, and you don't. I mean, call to arms. I want to say you have this imperative, this encouragement to change your desire. Actually, this is what you're trying to say all the time. Not, you know, make a war. Change your desire, and this is what happens in Pack Up Your Things, right? Yes. The disidentification, and this is, I think, maybe also a question, because I was thinking, like, who do you talk to when you write these columns? Who are the readers that you imagine that you have to tell them to pack up your things and destabilize everything that holds up their subjectivities? Because it's also a strategic question, you know? Do you think you talk with a Liberation reader who is like this leftist, or do you think you talk to all these bodies you just mentioned, you know, the elderly, the children, the crip movement, etc., who were not acknowledged in this political sovereignty, and who actually, you know, might be, you know, we have been, in philosophy in the last 20 years at least, we have emphatically been affirming, you know, this kind of subjectivities that are transgressive and disidentified and outside of themselves and very precarious, you know, as ruptures to the symbolic order. But of course, it's the question, do we tell them, pack up your things and, you know, deconstruct your whole...
Well, the thing is that
this perpetual becoming.
This is a good question about how the book can be read as well. Is that the book is a political diary. So everything that I'm saying in the book, I'm telling first to myself. So that I just want to, you know, it's a way. For me, writing is a technology of subjectivity. That's what is one of the things that I'm interested in. And basically, for instance, the same way that when I was doing Testo Junkie, for me, writing was as important as testosterone, and rather I needed to write this book fully to kind of embrace another level of transformation of myself, right? So I guess that with these columns, sometimes even if I publish them on a journal, like Libération, a big newspaper, whatever. I'm really like many times is basically like my own political diary. So when I wrote that column, this was the end of the year, basically. I was again moving, right? So for me, pack up your things is not, I'm not telling people pack up your things. It's what I've been told by society all the time. Pack up your things, get your things there, here, change your sex, do this, that, you know. So it's not, sometimes that can be tricky. So it's not just that I'm saying that to people, do that, but it's basically also what is being said to me, or things that I'm telling to myself as well. Because I lived during, of course, in a very kind of a very privileged condition as well, but it was like 4 years of my life that basically I was moving all the time. And as much as this can be seen as this kind of a cognitive worker of today that is like going from place to place, it ends up being like a destruction of any possibility for subjective struggle. This condition of basically like being constantly adapting to things, I mean, which is really like the neoliberal condition, right? So at a certain point, your backbone force, the place where you could actually resist power, is being undone, right? So, and of course, many times in the book, if you,
I also read it as a very performative language, a very language in a way enacting this mutation while writing, and I would also not say it's not mere analytical nor metaphorical, right? It's really this writing in intervention, but I think it's important to understand and to point it out, and it has, of course, similarities with Testo Junkie, because it also has this biographical way of language, of really a complete disclosure of transition materializing on your body. And what I find interesting in this book, to go back to your condition, as you said, this condition of being all the time in this transitioning moment, in this book, and what I find, what is for me like the plus, or like the continuation of Testo Junkie, it is you pick up the thread there and you talk about the changing of the material body, but you also talk about how this transitioning body is confronted on administrative and institutional levels. And this is super interesting in the book, where there is like a column where it says first name Paul Beatrice Preciado, and there's all these scenes where you have a passport of a female assigned person, and you go as the Pole as you are in the border, and you cannot cross the border because you cannot pass, or that you have to feminize yourself so that you pass. So for me, this was a nice continuation, if you want, of Testo Junkie in these conditions. And then, interestingly enough, then you get your passport. This is what you did, you know, you actually did the transition. This is what we see in this book. It ended, and this is, of course, a question, you know, if we want to be in this perpetual becoming, you know, where is the backbone, as you say? And you do the transition, and you say again and again, though, that you don't identify with the man that you are assigned to, even in this passport.
Yes.
You don't, this voice, as we said,
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I mean, the thing is that when I wrote Testo Junkie, for instance, it was like a period in which I decided to write both on the experiment of taking testosterone for 9 months, and at the same time I was doing this kind of a political genealogy of hormones, right? And then I did a kind of let's say, the counter history of sexuality from the 50s to now. And it was like a very indie project, but I was very much like very close to both my body and the archive, like looking into the archives of the 1950s, right? And then what was interesting is that I started to travel enormously. And through the traveling, and at the same time that my body was changing and the whole thing, what became clear to me is that it was not anymore the question of me transitioning. What became clear to me is that we are, as a planet, going through a global transition, right? And a major political transition. This is what now for me is, I think, is at the core of the work that I'm doing now, and is my obsession. I think that we're going through a moment that is very similar to what the 16th century was. A moment basically in which, if you think about the 16th century, we went from an oral culture into a culture of writing. The printing press was invented. The subject became like a reader reading the words of the state. But also we have like the colonial enterprise that was launched, and then capitalism with it. So I think that, of course, and that world, which is really important, that world is the world that invented the taxonomy, the modern taxonomy of race, gender, and sex that we are still using now. And I think that this world that basically spans from the 16th century to now is the world that is now collapsing. Mm-hmm. And we don't know exactly how this shift will be. And that's why it's important at least to be conscious, to be aware that this shift is taking place. And this is precisely also why we're going through this revolution. Because the shift that we will see in the next following years will be a complete epistemological shift, a transformation of what we understand by political subjectivity. And of course, this can also have like enormous political consequences, right? So it will be like a reshafting, remapping of the bodies that have been historically considered as subjected and those that have had sovereignty. This is going to be reshuffled. But how is this going to be done? This has to be fought for the next century, probably, right?
Yeah. If we're lucky, right? If we're lucky, this is going to be reshuffled. I think in Corona times, and you have written this very well also in your column after you had Corona.
Yes,
because you actually had the disease. It was with very heavy symptoms, and 1 week after you wrote 2 columns and 2 texts.
Yeah, and then I went back to bed.
And went back to bed, actually, yes, for a second phase.
Yes.
This was amazing. We were in contact. One of these columns, we got to put it in the book, or like Heinrich Geiselberger put it in the book, and we also translated here for HAU-1. And you make clear also in your new text that I like a lot, nous étions sur un point de faire la féministe révolution. We were on the urge of making a feminist revolution, then the virus came, that this is dystopic and utopic scenarios at the same time. And of course, the decisive questions are how to enable the one and disable the other, because there is a simultaneity of revolution and counter-revolution, if you want me to use your words, right? And you were talking about the extreme right also radicalizing itself. So I think the question, 2 questions, because I also try to come back also to the book a bit, to be the midwife of its birth.
Yes, I'm so happy that it's in German,
so
by the way. I mean,
I think it will. What you said about the 16th century, where these epistemologies were invented, you know, and you say in the book again and again that they actually are mental concepts and political fictions that don't exist. You say your body does not exist is one title, the South does not exist is another title. You say for the Catalan struggle, you say the nation does not exist, and it's always, I have to say, not so big philosophical, pompous, ontological ways of saying it, but it's very much saying it through everyday observations and experiences in a way is like little literature, small philosophy, right? This is, I think, the nice thing about the book, that it talks talks about all these epistemologies, but in a very concrete way. And then, of course, you say these things all does not exist. They are mental concepts that, of course, materialize also brutally in even necropolitics, disciplinary power.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
but there is, of course, the longing for existence. And I try to put this in regards to your question of where is this the dystopic or utopic scenario. You know, in this book, there is all these things don't exist, but where do we exist, actually? You know,
well,
what is the place?
Yeah, yeah.
And the book, of course, is also suggesting the Uranus, which is a space, is the place. Gesture, truly Sunryan gesture. It suggests the trembling, which is, but also an endangered situation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So,
well, yeah. When I'm saying that when I say that my body doesn't exist, it's a very different thing than when I say the nation doesn't exist. It might look the same in the book, but it is really not exactly the same. What I mean is that there are certain bodies that do not have political existence, and this is a very large condition. This is a condition that is shared today by many bodies, right? And probably is one of the most critical and crucial conditions that how these bodies that do exist physically do not have political existence. And one of the questions of the book, which is the classical question of political emancipation, but is now maybe being asked differently, is how you go from existing as a body to have a political existence, right? And that is a very complex move, right? Then there are, as opposed to that there are entities that exist without having any physical existence, right? Which is it can look paradoxical, but I think that's is this kind of asymmetrical relationship between ontology and politics, right? This is the case, for instance, of the state. The nation state has a strong political existence. Nevertheless, it doesn't really exist, right? But it has more existence than the bodies that have to cross the frontier, for instance, right? So here I'm speaking about different ontologies. It's a question, I guess, that it might also be my way of discussing with the new realism and this new hype on ontologies. Is the question is not so much, I mean, ontology is a very, let's say, prosaic or complex structure, and therefore is the overlapping of ontology and politics that is interesting to me, right? And that I'm trying to explore in the book. For instance, maybe people don't know that I will just comment on this briefly, because I think it's quite interesting that when you have to go through a legal gender change, right? To have your new passport and have a new name being assigned, a new gender being assigned, which is already a privilege because a lot of people don't have those passports and cannot even have access to that change. But when you go through that process, actually, and it's the case in Spain, for instance, I don't know how this will be in Germany, but I think it's quite similar in many different countries in Europe. The state destroys your the legal papers that were given to you when you were born, right? So that in a sense, who you were when you're being born and your political existence at that moment has to be, in a sense, erased by the state for the state to be able to reissue you a full new political identity, right? Like the state cannot accept that someone can actually go through a gender change, right? Yes. So, and these I'm concerned about these acts of administrative institutional erasure, which I think is the condition of political minorities through history. So one of the questions that will be crucial for us in the next coming years, and precisely now, and I think that this became like even more evident with through the crisis of the corona. Even more now in the moment that basically many of the political institutions that actually were like guaranteeing or given legitimation to bodies through different administrative forms, like for instance, either the school, the hospital, the prison, the psychiatric institution, and so on, all of them are really being undone and are also collapsing, right? So, and of course, like I'm quite interested to basically like follow closely, like study the way these institutions are falling apart, so that us collectively, because we're going to have to do something collectively, and things will not go back to be the way they were before, and so on. So things are constantly changing, and we have like a historic opportunity to reorganize things differently and think collectively if we want those institutions, or maybe we want to change the institutions and we do something else, right?
I mean, the institutions, as you say, distribute political sovereignty in a very manner that is based on slavery, gender, patriarchy, colonial regime. So we not want it, but because we have to open for the public, I want my last question to you, and this concerns, of course, alliances and this us you're talking about. Under Corona, if you want. You know, you have the we say revolution, us, you say about this collective subject in a way. And we see also in the book that you reach out to a lot of subjectivities where you say, my trans body or the trans bodies, they actually make these institutions tremble because we don't fit. Their anatomical, their medical protocols, they don't fit. Their administrative, protocols don't fit, as you said. And also other subjectivities. And then we have like this Preciadian multitude, if you want, with a crowd, a very transversal crowd, you would say, where we have also migrants, racialist subjects, refugees, indigenous people, people from the crip movement, sex workers, queers, etc., etc. You also say, in your last column on Corona, which I loved, a transversal, transfeminist, anti-colonial and ecological struggle, a Tsomou political revolution. So as my last question, and we have to be brief to get the questions from the audience, is of course, okay, all this Preciadian multitude, this transfeminist alliance, how can we build it without, in a way, claiming that we're all the same? Because this is a core question, of course, that has been also discussed in the feminist movement and is being discussed today even more, that how can we actually make an alliance without erasing our differences? Because there is also the question that how can we talk about all these subjectivities as if they are in the same situation, although they have different situatednesses, with Donna Haraway if you want, and different experiences. And maybe you can wrap this up in this Corona moment to get to two very interesting questions from the audience.
Okay, well, the thing is, for me, it's not so much a question of like basically like a collection of subjectivities that we have to put together. It's not this is not the issue. For me, the issue is a radical politics of the body. That's the question that I'm pointing towards, and this is the point where basically and Brad Cocker was reading the column on animalism and why I think feminism is not a humanism, and I think this is crucial to understand why feminism cannot be either an identity politics. Which will be, it's not humanism, it's not identity politics for women, it's something else. It's basically a radical critique of the power taxonomies and the regime of power that emerge from colonial capitalism. That being said, this gives you a cartography of bodies that have been historically excluded from what we understand for sovereignty or by sovereignty, right? This being said, I'm not saying that all of them become like the same body or the same subject at all. On the contrary, right? On the contrary, when I'm speaking about the reorganization, a political reorganization, I'm also speaking about a new grammar and a new language, right? So we're going to have to name the world anew. We're going to have to invent new ways of naming things, new names, even this language of the right and the left, the language of identity politics, they do refer, all of them, to the politics of production and reproduction of the colonial capitalist time.
Yes.
We're going to have to think collectively, what is the language that we're going to give to the world if we want to restructure the relationships between bodies. So basically, like a maximum amount of bodies could share energy, because this is finally a question of exchanging and sharing energy. So we could even call this kind of politics photo cooperation, like cooperation through light, cooperation. You were speaking before about Sandra. And yes, there is a very cosmic tone to what I'm saying, not among other things, because maybe this can look crazy, but I've been waiting for the aliens to come since I was a child. and now I think this is, and now every time that I'm speaking publicly, I'm basically launching a call, and I'm saying, okay, now is the time.
For the aliens to come.
Yes, for the aliens to come, and for the aliens of the world to become more alien, to really like develop themselves as something other than human, or dehumanize themselves and develop like a different way of relating to each other, a different way of relating to the planet as a whole. So yes, there is like this Uranian call in the book. Also because the name of the book, and then I will close with this, but also because the name of the book is actually coming from a dream that I had, in which basically I had an apartment in Uranus, and then it was very difficult for me to leave that apartment, right? But I think if I wanted to really choose that very odd name, that then when it became a name in English, my editor said to me, like, it's impossible to use this name because it looks like your anus, yeah, like basically, yes. So anal, yes, right? And then I thought it's even more interesting why it's being called this way, right? Yeah. So because one of the things that I'm coming back to the question of naming the world anew, like giving new names to everything.
You do it all the time in the book.
Exactly.
You invent all the time, and we heard it also. Even the the colonial patriarchal techno-science regime is a new thing, although it is already established. And I think it is clear that the language is part of it.
But I wanted to say one last thing, and then we go to just to say that part of the why it's crucial that this is a dream, and because I think that if revolution is possible, will be done with desire and imagination. It will not be done the usual way it's being thought, right? It will not. It's not, and it's going back to the issue of calling to arms. I mean, it's calling to dreams. It's calling to dreams in a sense, or calling to fiction as the main source of a transformation of reality. And I think that this we that maybe is the aliens of the world, those that have been living in this planet but have not had the political conditions to basically even live together with the other ones in a situation of sharing the same energy. This we has also to be constructed through fiction and through dreams and through desire. It's not something that is already given.
Yes. Okay. We have here two questions that could really reconnect to this we, the strategic we of the living bodies that have to shift desire, right?
Okay.
So the one question is, shouldn't disabled crip people and their knowledge and struggles be involved, if not at the forefront, when analyzing the notion and potential of vulnerable bodies? Why is there no engagement with crip theory, queer disability studies in your text? I read those. I read those that are rated the highest. So this was one, and then the other one. You described the lockdown in European capitals in continuity with refugee camps, while the material.
Maybe
yes,
Margarita, if you
one
want,
after the
maybe
other. Okay.
It's easier.
Okay.
Because,
so, crip question.
Well, crip theory, crip politics is at the core of what I do. I think that even before thinking of my own work as trans theory, or even thinking about my own subjectivity as trans, the issue of being abnormal, for instance, because I have a prosthetic jaw in my case, was super crucial to the way I constructed myself, and I constructed everything that I do. And I think that if the body is so crucial for what I do, this is one of the reasons, because basically my body has never been a given, has never been something that was already there and from which I could then develop a theory or something like that. And then there are two or three texts in the book that actually speak about that.
Yes.
Directly. I've been working with many collectives, especially in Spain, that are doing crip politics that are absolutely fantastic, like Antonio Centeno or Postop, and the Yes We Fuck movement for crip people. So I totally, for me, are some of the most inspiring movements.
Yes.
And then all the work that I've been doing in museums lately, especially with the work of Lorenza Bodner, is really dealing with that.
Of course.
But I have to say that I also think that I can't say what I can say from the kind of situated political body that I have, and other people have to say what they have to say, and they can even do it with my own theory if they want, but they have to say what they have to say. There will be nothing worse than me pretending to be to say everything about cripness, colonialism, and I'm speaking from the political tradition that is mine, which is the one that I was speaking about at the beginning of the conversation, basically being born in a fascist country and being born first being a lesbian and then becoming trans and exile and so on, right? So that political situation for me is it's important for what I do. And then I think that people that have a stronger experience of being institutionalized or being considered as crippled should do their own theory and mix it up with what we do, and the alliance will be even stronger and more beautiful. So yes, all for it. Waiting for you guys is what I'm saying.
You're writing for it. We have the next voted question, because the people can even rate the questions. You describe the lockdown in European capitals in continuity with refugee camps. While the material conditions in actual refugee camps are fundamentally different, is there for you a politics of polemic styles, an end to the force of metaphor? And we had a similar question also be put in the beginning of the discussion.
No, not at all. Not at all.
You say our skin is our Lampedusa, something like that.
Yes. Well, what I'm saying, what I was trying to, I was trying to convey how biopolitics work, right? How biopolitics works, and what I was trying to say is that the political technologies that were implemented through the years of the so-called migrant crisis upon bodies that were considered migrants were now being extended differently to the rest of the population in Europe. this doesn't mean, of course, that staying at home is equally, that is a condition of subjection and dispossession and violence equally that can be, kind of compared to what is being, what people live in migrant camps or in refugee camps. Absolutely not, right? But what I'm saying is that we have, that's my philosophical, if you want, maybe I failed if people are asking this question, but that's my philosophical job of basically trying to analyze how technologies of power, techniques of the body, apparatus of verification work, and how, and sometimes like work how they try to understand how they work there where we do not perceive them as being working, right? So, but I think, for instance, what is happening now, this 1.5 meter situation, this condition of the mask, as political, because in reality they've been saying like social separation, but in reality what has happened is an undoing of the political condition, right? By putting everyone in their private apartments, right? So I'm not saying that the conditions or violence are the same. What I'm saying is that the biopolitical technologies at work are very similar, and that we have to be aware of those similarities, to be able sometimes also to struggle, to collectively understand the way we're doing things, right? Like in a sense, maybe if we, I was also in that column, I have to say, or that text that is a longer text, but that I have to say was written not for the queer community in a very, it was written really for, when I was saying Lampedusa, now your skin is Lampedusa. Yes. In that case, your skin, yes. I was speaking to the people here in Paris that have been saying like, well, yeah, we cannot get more migrants in France because this and that, right? And suddenly I was telling them, well, now the frontier that you've been like putting there in Lampedusa and sticking to the coast of Greece now is stretching, and then getting into your own home and becoming your skin, right? So it was more a critique of the let's say kind of a very privileged position from which many people were saying, well, yes, I mean, the border politics are complex, but we can't do anything on this. This has nothing to do with us. Okay. Yes, has to do with us because the biopolitics is not just address, or in that case, necropolitics is not just address at the borders, but it's also going to become the way in which the whole population of Europe will eventually be treated. Yes. So those of course, what is different is that
this is the question I said about difference, right? Because they materialize at the end differently, and I think a way of thinking about it is, and that is why I was asking you, who do you address? Because if you write that performatively, the way you write, it is a question. Whom do you talk to, and how do you articulate the we? And then, of course, and that is so. It makes sense that you say it was not the crowd I was articulating, and at the same time, yes, I think like there is no outside of a strategic way of alliances, which is not on any terms. We are in a more privileged position than the people in Idlib. Right?
Yes. No, I mean, I guess just to make the argument really simple, what I was trying to say is that the way in which politics have been constructed in the last, especially after the Twin Towers, has been through the politics of the border, right? And this very sharp distinction between the migrants and the national citizen. And those frontiers, they seem to have like a very specific geographic location, right? And what was happening during the time of Corona, and this is still happening midway in a sense, is that those frontiers were like shrinking down up to the level of the body. That's what I was trying to say, right?
Yes.
And this was also the case, if you think, even though the conditions are absolutely different.
Yes.
But in a sense, like if you think about like men older than 50 years old, being those that are more affected by Corona,
yes,
and then dying, right? In a sense, or even the very unprivileged position in which the let's say lower class and working class populations have been touched by the Corona, you see that in a sense there are many commonalities. Also the ways in which, for instance, prisons, hospitals themselves, and especially homes for the elderly, have become necropolitical places, right? So that's what I wanted to talk about. Right?
It's a matrix, right? That affects in a similar epistemological logic, if you want, right? And I think this is the core of what you're trying to do by describing biopolitics, although it's in different materializations. So our time is up, actually. As you can imagine, there is still one question on ontology, if you want to go more philosophically, or one question on revolution and desire, and we then have to really stop.
I would say... Well, then let's take the question on revolution and desire, because I think it's better than to end up with ontology.
So again, on revolution and desire, it says, do you think this crisis and the revolution we desire together is about handling uncertainty in politics like you did with gender?
Interesting. Well, I don't know. I think I don't know why they presuppose so much that there is so much uncertainty. You know, I think with gender, I don't think that a transgender person has more uncertainty than anyone else. Maybe you're just like more, you become more conscious of how uncertain is gender always, in the sense of how many political techniques have to be implemented for gender not to be uncertain, right?
Yes.
So that first, and then I don't think so. I think that for me, I would say the key, as I was saying before, is that until now, and this especially within the feminist, gay, lesbian movement and trans movement, we have to think what have been the aims and objectives of the politics that we have been fighting for. If we think about like the last 30 years, the aims of sexual minorities in many respects have been concentrated around the issue of gay marriage, adoption of children, and legal equality, right? So in a sense, for me, that's what is challenging now, is basically what will be the horizon, the new horizon for the political struggle that we have to do now, right? So maybe we might be, I mean, I'm not going to say that we've been losing time, but we've been reframing our radical, revolutionary, political, sexual, anti-racist struggles. We have been reframing those within in the context of liberal neo-capitalist or neoliberal politics, right? And I think that now we are in a different situation. I see that I don't see how this will not be the case in the US. I cannot imagine how, for instance, places like Brazil, like Mexico, Argentina will emerge from this both medical, political crisis, right? So yes, I think that we have to think collectively. I don't know what I'm speaking about. Like, people know me already with my madness around the Parliament of Bodies and all these things. But I was thinking that now that we have close cultural and educational institutions, like for a really long time, for what was supposed to be like a, a medical emergency, my question is, why couldn't we reclose them? Since basically the school as we know it, the museum as we know it, the university as we know it, I don't know if there is really something that still we can learn from those disciplines. And maybe what we have to do is to unlearn from certain things that we learned in the past. So I'm thinking that maybe we could kind of occupy those institutions differently. I mean, you already do it in the theater, the way you do it. I'm not saying that all institutions are not doing that, but I'm thinking that many are not, and that there are still, like, schools and universities thinking, oh, they're going back to normal. And I think that on the contrary, what is interesting for me about the time of the corona is that, in a sense, yes, that's a time of transition. Yes, that was a time of transition, a time in which basically the routines are the things that we are used to do on everyday basis are being basically they are blocked, or they're changed, radically changed, and something else can emerge from that situation. Yes. And my worry is that is precisely that's why I'm trying to be utopian, because my worry is that we collectively we say, well, there is nothing.
We just go back as the way it was.
And and no, I have to say no, 100 times, 1,000 times, no. Please no. Let's not go back to any place.
Exactly,
before.
because it was part of the problem. There's this beautiful Argentinian projection. We don't want to go back because the back as it was was part of the problem. I think that's a wonderful end note in this marathon. We can talk forever, of course.
Much for making it possible.
Thank you. There's rich applause here, the audience. You cannot hear it in your homes.
That were amazing as well.
Wait. Yes. I hope this was a bit like a good introduction to the book that I've put to people to see. There is 2 columns on Corona, just freshly when Paul came out of his sickness, that are inside, that made it inside, not in the French and not in the Spanish and English book. And yes, I hope that this gave us enough incentive to clarify your thoughts. I think that was important, to clarify your thoughts. And then also for us, and for a political reorganization of living bodies, for a call into dreams to shift desire, as you say, in the last columns that everyone should read. We were on the verge of doing a feminist revolution, and then the virus came. And as the desire as the main source of transformation, and becoming alien to the human, because as you say in this column, Corona actually showed us our entanglement with the more than humans in the world. So for a somato-political planetary revolution, and this is how I want to end the occupation of the theaters. Thank you very much. Yes?
Say, like, you look like a TV, like a TV speaker saying suddenly, like, oh, we're going into a somato-political revolution, and it seems
Uranus.
That it's real, and it's coming. Yes.
Uranus, I said it. Yes. So, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Peaches, for watching us. Thank you very much to this wonderful technical team of the HAU who made the stage into a really TV studio. And you both, a lot of love.
Yes, and thank you, Black Cracker and Susanne Sachse. Thank you.
Good, we thank them enough.
Thanks.
Have a nice evening, Paul.
I love you. Thank
Ciao.
you.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Thanks.